Did you know that creme brulee is one of the easiest desserts and budget-friendly that you will ever make? I didn't know that either. I thought it was some kind of elaborate, fancy dessert that it would be impossible to make at home. But I was wrong, of course. We are here making this video. So for those of you who don't know what creme brulee is, it's a creamy custard that is served with very thin layer of sugar, burnt with a torch that I will also show you how to and where to buy. And that's pretty much it. So creme brulee, like I said, is very easy to make, but you have to keep a few things in mind. So this is one of those desserts where technique is the key to success. So in this video, I'm gonna show you step-by-step instructions for a delicious creme brulee. And make sure you stick around, because at the end of this video, I will show you some tips that will either make or break the results. So to start, we're gonna pour 1.5 cup of heavy whipping cream into a small pot. To that, I'm gonna add 1/2 stick of vanilla bean. I usually buy it at Costco, but you can also find it on Amazon. I will include a link below. Fresh vanilla bean is usually slightly moist, and I cut it in half, scrape the seeds, and throw the rest in the cream. If you do not have vanilla bean, you can use vanilla extract, but fresh vanilla bean does add that extra something to this dessert. I highly recommend it. I always have vanilla beans in my house, and I only actually use them to make creme brulee. That is how much I like to use this in this particular recipe. To add even more flavor, I am adding orange zest, about 1/2 tablespoon, and it's completely optional. Set the pot on a medium-high heat and cook it until cream is scalded. That means it has to be very, very hot, but not boiling. Do not bring it to boil. In the meantime, I'm gonna crack 4 eggs and separate the egg yolks from egg whites. I'm going only to use egg yolks in this recipe. Whisk a 1/4 cup of sugar, just enough to incorporate. Do not beat the eggs. I'm gonna check on the cream now, and it looks like it's hot enough. It's my little test. Take it from the heat and gradually add to the egg mixture. Very slowly add the cream to the egg yolks. The cream is very hot, and we do not want to scramble the eggs. I like to strain the mixture into a dish that has a little spout, so it's easier to pour into smaller ramekins. You can either pour the custard into 7 small ramekins or 4 bigger ones. It's up to you. I personally like shallow ramekins, so I have lots of surface to pour sugar on and have lots of crunch instead of having lots of custard and just a little crunch. This custard is very rich, so too much of it might be just too much, but that's just me. And we are ready to go into 325-degree oven for about 25 minutes, depending on your oven. I am pouring here enough hot water to cover the ramekins halfway. To check if they are ready, you're gonna shake them very gently. So if the custard jiggles a lot, they're not ready. They do not have to be very firm, but there only should be a minimum movement of the custard. Remove them from the oven and the baking sheet and let them cool down. I usually leave the hot water in the oven for it to cool down as well before I remove it, so I don't burn myself. When they cooled, place them in the fridge for at least 4 hours. You can make them a day ahead or refrigerate overnight, or make them in the morning or for after dinner dessert. After it cooled, this is how the custard should look like. I am using a simple torch I bought a long time ago that came with the small ramekins. Stores like Target, Walmart, or even TJ Maxx carry them. If you cannot find them there, I will include a link for a torch in the description below so you can purchase online. After you removed them from the fridge, add about 1 or maybe 2 teaspoons of sugar per the little ramekins, and the big one I think I used about half a tablespoon to a tablespoon of sugar, and spread the sugar around the surface evenly. I will show you in this video the difference what kind of sugar you use makes. It's going to be very interesting. Here I'm using a granulated sugar, and when you use granulated sugar, your results will look like this, very light in color. I personally like a nice dark and burnt color, so I like to use this brown sugar, and as you can see, the sugar is not as fine as the white sugar I was using. That makes a huge difference in the result. And you can see it right away how dark and brown the sugar burns. Completely different result. But obviously it's what you like. If you like it lighter, use the lighter sugar. But if you like this beautiful dark honey color, you need to use the brown and very thick sugar. And also how long it takes to torch it, it's gonna depend on the power of your torch. And this one that I'm using is definitely not that powerful. Make sure you allow a minute for the sugar to harden. And this is how I test it. Yep, sounds perfect. And now it's the time for a taste test. And that's what I'm always waiting for. My favorite part of the day. And this is what I call a perfect texture. So it's not too runny, not too thick. If you'd like to have it thicker, add less cream. If you like it more runny, then you add more cream. Simple. As rich as this custard is, if you separate it into 7 ramekins, like the small ones that I was using at the beginning, you will have only 230 calories per serving, plus 1 or 2 teaspoons of sugar. That's about 15, 30, maybe 30 more calories. And that is great. You can incorporate this type of desserts even if you own a cat, or you have a lower calorie budget for whatever reason. Now that we already made the dessert, the tips that I promised you I'm gonna give you. So the first tip, the most important tip that I learned is never ever beat the eggs with the sugar when you put it in the beginning. And I didn't know because YouTube, I guess, either didn't exist or I didn't know about it. So my first recipe was just a written a little note like we used to have, and I followed that recipe. It said nothing about beating the eggs. It was just incorporate eggs with the sugar. So I did, but since when you make the cakes, you always want to beat the egg yolks with sugar for nice creamy texture, and that is exactly what you do not want to do with this particular recipe. You want to just combine the sugar with the egg yolks, just enough to combine. Do not incorporate any air. What happens when you do incorporate air, when you put it in the oven, that foam that is created on top is going to burn, and it's going to create big old mess. The texture is not going to be nice and not soft, what I was looking for, the word smooth. Yeah, you're not going to have a smooth surface, and that's not a good creme brulee. And besides the fact that you want to avoid beating the eggs, you also have to keep in mind not to have any kind of air bubbles. Well, sometimes the air bubbles will form on the surface So that is exactly why I strain the custard twice before I put them to bake. As you could see in the video, that was exactly the reason why I'm making sure I don't have any air bubbles. Tip number 2 is the temperature of the oven. And I actually learned that right now by making the creme brulees. So the recipe calls for 325 degree oven, but some ovens are different temperatures. And this particular custard is very sensitive to temperature. So what happened to me is I put it in the 325 oven, pour that water, and in about 20 minutes, the custard was a little bit bubbly and it had a little bit brownish places on top. You do not want that. So the next batch that I made sure that I figured out the temperature of my oven, and it was 300 degrees. So with my oven, 300 degrees, 25 minutes. Make sure you test your oven before you make a big reveal. Bonus tip. Aren't you glad you stick around? When you add sugar at the very end and you are ready to serve, and you torch it already, it's ready to eat, make sure it doesn't stand there for an hour and wait before you eat it. So when you torch the sugar, you wait for a minute or two for it to set, and that's about it. If you wait for an hour and that creme brulee is outside already with the sugar, thin, crunchy sugar on top, it will actually get soft and it's gonna be a mess. It's gonna pretty much, just like your ice cream, it's gonna melt and it's not gonna be good, and as far as I know, you cannot save that. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you check out the rest of the dessert videos right here. And if you like the video, please click the like button, leave a comment below, and do not forget to subscribe for more recipes like this that will fit definitely in your calorie budget.